Today, I'll be looking at why Vanguard's conservative retirement timelines might be keeping you working longer than necessary. Over my years helping clients plan for retirement, I've discovered that Vanguard's projections frequently miss key factors that allow for earlier retirement without compromising financial security. That's exactly why I'm making this video today, to show you why you might be able to retire much sooner than Vanguard's model suggests. So let's get right into it. So over my career working with folks trying to retire, and specifically people trying to retire early. Now, for my videos, if you're not familiar with my channel, when I talk about early retirement, I'm talking about people trying to retire usually in their 50s and specifically anytime before age 65. 65 for me is that key kind of timeline, or that key kind of marker in the road for retirement, because that's the age at which they qualify for a lot of the retirement benefits that are necessary, that are critical for retirement, like healthcare, Medicare, basically. And so anytime someone wants to retire before then, there are just a lot of planning considerations that must be accounted for a successful retirement. And in my time working with early retirees, I would say that by far, most of them are coming to conversations with me already having done a lot of research. They are well informed, and many of them are at a minimum very familiar with Vanguard. Vanguard is a company that has, I would say, probably the best reputation within finance, within the finance industry, investments, etc. And it's based on, frankly, they've earned it. Vanguard is kind of the gold standard for looking out for clients' best interests. And they've earned that reputation for over decades of doing the right thing, doing the right things. I would say what I find most valuable or kind of compelling about the impact Vanguard's had on the financial industry is their transparency around fees, the impact that those have, and creating transparent, low-cost investment products for regular people. So most notably, they're kind of they've been at the vanguard, if you will, of creating index funds, low-cost mutual funds, and exchange-traded funds, ETFs, for just regular people to be able to invest in, which has been phenomenal for, frankly, Vanguard customers, clients, and for the rest of the industry. Much of the rest of the industry has been forced to lower costs overall because of Vanguard's example and lead that they've taken. And so I have just a tremendous amount of respect for Vanguard because of this gold star reputation that Vanguard has with the investing public. Anything that they put out towards the public has the highest reputation. People trust it, and I would say in the vast majority of cases, it's not foolhardy. Like I said, they've earned that trust. However, some of the information and some of the solutions and products they put out to the public, I find are just lacking, and have actually, in my opinion, led to people working longer than they need to, not being able to retire when they'd like to, and frankly making just kind of ill-advised financial decisions just based on some bad information. And so one of those specific things that we're going to talk about in today's video is all about the retirement income calculator you can find online that's on Vanguard's website. Now, this calculator is used by, I would say, if not millions, hundreds of thousands of people, because Vanguard as an institution manages trillions of dollars here in the United States, and I believe internationally as well. But because of that gold star reputation, they're frequently, the first place that people go to find authoritative information about investing and retirement, etc. And so this retirement calculator is, in my opinion, probably being depended upon for people's kind of basic financial planning considerations when it comes to retirement. So if you go to this calculator and start entering information, it's very easy to use. You'll get some results, and based off of those results, people are going to make decisions. And as I'm using that calculator as a professional, I can see right offhand that there are key assumptions that are being missed. There are fundamental flaws in the way that the calculator is actually generating the responses, and there's critical pieces of information that are going to make the results of that calculator, the result of that tool, somewhere between useless and harmful for many people. I would say it's probably helpful for only the most plain vanilla, bare bone retirement example. And from what I can tell, using it is essentially useless and harmful for somebody who's trying to pursue an early retirement, whether you're kind of a financial independence, retire early person looking to retire very early, or just someone who is looking for a work optional lifestyle, retiring pre-age 65, sometime in your 50s. It's going to be totally unhelpful. So what I thought we might be able to do is let's go over to the calculator. Let's work through some examples of how it works, go through how it calculates answers, and then I can show and help illustrate what some of the key data points and information that's totally excluded from the calculator, why those things are so example, and what are those fundamental flaws that are at the heart of this calculator that make it, not helpful for consumers and hopeful retirees. So let's jump over to that and let's see what we can learn and find out from it. Okay, so what I've done is gone through this retirement calculator as though I were a 55-year-old trying to estimate my own retirement prospects if I retire at age 58. So as I go through this screen here, so right here on investor.vanguard.com/tools-calculators-retirement income calculator, that's where we have found this Vanguard calculator. So you can see here, I'm a 55-year-old. I want to retire at age 58. I make $155,000 a year. And right now, between my contributions and employer matches, et cetera, we're saving 20% of income. So I've already saved 1.5 million up to this point. And based on my estimations, I think I will need 75% of my current income once I am retired to live on. So right there, interestingly enough, there are so many assumptions that have been baked into this that I am just really kind of just hopping and skipping over, but they make a huge impact. So I would say, namely, the biggest assumption that I think is difficult for retirees to estimate or to really figure out how to answer is, what is this amount of income that you're going to need once you retire? So right off the bat, key information or kind of key details, fundamental flaws that have begun here. So I would say right off the bat, this is the first one, which is, how much income are you going to need once you retire? So that income calculation, how much do I need dollars to spend? Number one, this number is not a linear number through time. In my experience working with early retirees, just about anybody, frankly, that spending changes over time. So there's a little rule of thumb that and like I said, if you watch my videos, you know how I feel about rules of thumb. I hate them. I think they are rot. However, that being said, look at me, I'm a hypocrite. There's one rule of thumb that I think generally is pretty accurate. I've just seen it, with working with folks over the years, which is the go-go, the slow-go, and the no-go phases of retirement. Early in retirement, people, your health is probably at its best. You want to do a lot of things. A lot of the things that are motivating you to consider a work optional or retirement, early retirement, those are the things that people end up doing in the first few years of retirement. Then as you get older, your routine slows down. You've done the things that are important to you. Spending might increase or might decrease, but typically it does kind of tend to decline. And then during the no-go years, these are the years when somebody sits in front of the television, watches a lot of daytime television, and sends you annoying emails about conspiracy theories and government issues. And anyway, that's what you do during the no-go years, in my experience. So the reason I bring up this spending here, the 75%, how much are you going to need, is that, frankly, this is I would just, at a minimum, it's inadequate because that spending is going to change over time. Sometimes someone's spending in the beginning of retirement is going to be maybe even higher than the working years. It could be lower. And so the reason I highlight this, a fundamental flaw to this calculator is basing out your income. You really ought to map out your cash flows as best as you can. How much are you going to spend? And there's a lot of ways of doing this, but I would just say at a high level, the assumption here that, you can just say, oh, it's going to be X percentage of my current earnings is a little bit of an oversimplification. It is what it is, but this is one of the kind of first issues that if your spending is going to diverge from this basic assumption, quite a bit, already, I don't know how useful it's going to be to proceed with this calculation. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put in our, I expect an annual return of, blank percent in retirement. And the calculator, this 5%, this was just pre-generated. I didn't enter that in. But if you click on this, actually, they provide, hey, historically, a 100% bond portfolio has averaged 6% from 1926 through 2020, and a stock portfolio 10% per year over that same time frame. So giving you that guidance and then putting in this 5%. I'm not going to get into investment rates of return, but I'll just say that having somebody just go ahead and put in some assumed rate of return like this is, man, there's just so many things that could go wrong here, either being overly conservative or being overly optimistic. Now, once we've done that, can put in here our some additional sources of income. So this is appropriate, right? I mean, most people have Social Security benefits. So for our retiree here, I went ahead and put in an expected benefit of $3,800. Now, looking at this, you would say, all right, Social Security benefit, $3,800. Look at here. This little info box tells us that, the average benefit for the 50 million Americans receiving Social Security is $1,500 a month. And I'll just tell you that I don't know how helpful that is. In fact, I would say it's not helpful at all. Using averages of 50 million people to put in a Social Security benefit, why wouldn't you just look up your own benefit? So presumably that's what somebody is doing here. They're putting in an estimate of their own benefit. However, it's so opaque. It's so non-specific here. My estimate of Social Security benefit, I put in a number. Now, me as a financial planner, when I look at this and think, all right, they're asking for my Social Security benefit, I would assume, all right, this is my projected benefit at my full retirement age, which for somebody of this, age and everything would be age 67. Now, it doesn't specify that anywhere, but I don't know. That's the assumption I'm making, right or wrong. I think it's wrong, actually, having gone through this calculator. But I don't know. And I'll just say that I have no estimated pension. So let's go ahead and run the calculation and see what we come up with. How is retirement looking like for us? Well, this looks pretty great. Wow, it says that based on the information you provided, if you retire at age 58, you may have a retirement savings balance of 1.6 million. And I'm guessing that is based off of the assumed rate of return, the contributions that I said I was putting in, and over 3 years. And you have an estimated monthly expense of $93.75 and an estimated you could expect a monthly income of $94.09 in retirement. Okay, so now all of a sudden, this is where some of the issues are coming through. I put in that my Social Security benefit at full retirement age was going to be $3,800 at age 67. So now I'm looking at this and it's telling me that, hey, my expected retirement income is going to be $94.09, or it could be that at age 58. And I can see here, based off of this nice little chart, that they are assuming that I will get $3,800 right away from Social Security. And so based off of this calculator, somebody could, presume that they're ready to go, rock and roll, let's retire. And I can start drawing Social Security. But I would suspect that anybody who even comes to this point, to even start doing calculations is going to, would be aware that you're not able to claim Social Security benefits at age 58. Right there, we have another major flaw in this calculator. What are we doing here? We're gonna diagram out. We're gonna put on a graph that somebody can, at age 58 and show what their expected retirement income could be, and you show, $9,400 with $3,800 of that assumed to be Social Security, without asking, okay, is that your benefit at full retirement age? I mean, it's just completely a very odd way of modeling this out and kind of putting that out to the public as a way of evaluating their readiness for retirement. So there's some other issues here while we're talking about Social Security. I've already laid out some of the flaws in this Social Security calculation, but there's actually more than this. Many people who retire are, guess what? Not single. They're married. Or if they're even if they're not currently married, perhaps they're a widow or a widower, perhaps they're divorced. And either one of those cases, there are going to be differences in your projected Social Security benefit. You're entitled to survivor benefits or spousal benefits. Or if you're married, you can likely expect a benefit and another benefit, or at a minimum, a spousal benefit into the household. So already we're looking at a Social Security projection that, from the start is just generating, information that is not helpful. It's not accurate. And then it's completely missing any one of these other contingencies they're not just these odd cases. These are other circumstances that I would say apply to most people, at least one of those different, things: divorced, married, widower, widower. I was about to say, I don't know how helpful that calculation is, but I'll go ahead and answer my own question. It's not helpful. It is decidedly unhelpful. There's a couple of other issues with this calculator and assumptions that are being made. So now that we've talked about the Social Security issues, there is another, I would say, fundamental flaw at the heart of this calculation. So if we go down, let's recalculate this. I'm not going to change any of the assumptions, and we're just going to see, we're going to pull up that benefit again, and let's look at your current retirement plan will provide. To calculate it, we first determine how much you have saved by the time you reach your retirement, your nest egg. So that's the amount we're projected to have at age 58. We then use the 4% rule. That is, we assume that you can afford to spend approximately 4% of your initial nest egg each year in retirement and be reasonably confident that you won't outlive your savings. The result is adjusted for inflation, 3% annually. I'm going to stop right there. This pulls up the next fundamental flaw in this calculator that we have to address, which is the assumed rate of inflation. Number one, I think it is important for a retiree to assume some amount of inflation in your retirement spending. And I think the data bears that out. My own experience working with hundreds of people in retirement, early retirement, shows that yes, that is something that you ought to do. Frankly, if I had to choose one or the other, choosing an inflation adjustment or a plan that has zero inflation adjustment, I would choose one that has some inflation built in. At a minimum, I think that would be a better way to proceed with your retirement planning. However, what someone ought to do, the best way to proceed with an inflation estimate is to look at what is your personal inflation rate. Every retiree has a personal or custom inflation rate. I was going through a meeting with some clients just last week here in my offices, and we were looking at their planned spending over retirement. They were concerned with expenses that might come up later in retirement, these sorts of things. So reviewing some data from JP Morgan, looking at banking information of hundreds of thousands of people, break down what is, the changes in spending over time for retirees. Now, inflation is a fickle thing, isn't it? But the way that inflation is calculated is the consumer price index. This measurement is measured by looking at different goods and services in the economy, different things like electronics and housing costs and fuel costs and food and insurance and healthcare and transportation, these sort of things, looking at all these different expenses and seeing how they change over time. Now, the reason why I emphasize your personal inflation rate is because every single person has unique spending or consumption, as an economist would refer to it. And so instead of using some generic, hey, on average, inflation has been, blank over the last 50 years, let's look at your personal inflation rate so that we have perhaps a more accurate and reasonable estimate for how your spending is going to change over time. So for example, are you renting, or do you have a paid off home, or do you have a home with a mortgage? Okay, so that number one, that I find that to be the key factor that impacts somebody's personal inflation rate, is their housing or expected housing expense. That is, a percentage of someone's spending over time. That is one of the largest contributors to inflation. And so the difference between someone who is renting compared with somebody who has a paid off home, or a home with a mortgage where they can expect their payment to stay basically level over time, that difference will have a huge impact on your personal inflation rate in retirement, and understanding that will impact how you factor expenses. Okay, this assumes, like I said, a 3% inflation rate, which off the bat is going to produce, an estimate that is, I think, at a minimum inaccurate, and at worst could be very harmful. It could cause somebody to save way more than they need to, or perhaps even undersave, although I think that's probably less likely. Usually these different calculators, they tend to skew towards forcing people into a situation where they're working longer than they need to and saving more than they have to. Okay, I want to go back to this number now. So let's say that somebody has got themselves in the situation where they've said, okay, well, wait a minute. Looks like I'm going to need $9,300 a month based on 75% of my pre-retirement income. And wait a minute, I'm not going to have Social Security, so I guess I'm just going to have this right here, 5609. Okay, well, that's not enough. So what might happen here is someone will say, well, goodness, let's say I'm not nearly going to have enough money by then, so I guess I'm going to have to wait until I can claim Social Security in order to retire. Or I guess I'm going to have to save a lot more than I actually need to. So this could easily cause someone to make conclusions that push them towards taking action that is very unhelpful for their retirement plan. Now, there are other assumptions in spending that are made in this calculator that I think are just clear oversights by this calculator. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on them, but I'm going to point them out because they are critical for an early retiree. The one that I want to highlight is healthcare. Healthcare in retirement, especially for an early retiree, is a critical aspect of your retirement planning process. If you retire before age 65, you need to figure out a way to cover your healthcare expenses, and it would be crazy, in my opinion, to retire without health insurance. Thankfully, or luckily, I should say, there are you can qualify for healthcare, for health insurance through the Affordable Care Act, and based on your savings and based on your income sources, once you stop working, it is absolutely possible to manage your income, manage your cash flow in such a way that you can qualify for Affordable Care Act health insurance subsidies, basically getting discounts to your healthcare so that you can have this can be an affordable component of your retirement plan. Without going into details on that, I have a lot of other videos on my channel that talk specifically about this. So look that up and you'll find some good information. So I'm going to talk about the fundamental flaw in this retirement planning calculator. The fundamental flaw in this retirement planning calculator is that it bases the amount of monthly income you can have on the 4% rule. And I wish that we would quit. This is at the heart of this plan, the fundamental flaw. The 4% rule, I wish we didn't call it that. I wish it wasn't, I don't call it that. I don't know, whatever. It's referred to that. And I think we should probably use a different way to refer to this, because it makes it seem as though it's some kind of immutable law of, law of nature, law of science that's been, the gold standard for how somebody should manage their retirement income. If you assume that you will only draw 4% out of your portfolio year by year, even making adjustments for inflation, I would posit that that is an excessively overly conservative method of generating income in retirement. When William Bengen published that research in the Journal for Financial Planning back in 1994, that was based off of, again, many assumptions that are just not relevant for most people. If I can get right to the heart of why it's overly conservative, it is overly conservative because it does not account for the impact of income sources later on in retirement. It also does not account for changes in spending over time in retirement. And so for this early retiree, even though they're not even going to have the opportunity for Social Security until age 62, even with that being the case, if we factor in Social Security coming in at 62, 67, even at age 70, a spousal benefit Social Security, what this does is it completely changes the arithmetic as to how much of their portfolio can be safely or reasonably distributed in retirement. It is very possible for somebody to retire and in the beginning of their retirement, take very large distributions from their portfolio, assuming that at some point in the future, they will have portion sometimes, or, a significant or at least some portion of their retirement income satisfied by guaranteed sources of income like Social Security. And so unless that's factored in, you are going to have someone who is overly cautious with their retirement. They will end up working longer than they need to build up a larger portfolio, and they may end up, or they may retire and they might live significantly below their spending capacity. So basing a retirement plan on the 4% rule is maybe at best a starting point to kind of start thinking about this stuff. Most of the time, it ends up being a very unhelpful rule of thumb that misguides retirees, and especially early retirees, to doing things that are not in line with what they can realistically do, or what they'd really like to do. Have a retirement plan that you can have confidence in. You can see that, going through this example, highlighting many of the fundamental flaws in this calculator, you can see that really to have a good sense of where you are in retirement, you need to be considering many other things. And yes, you can go that alone. There are other calculators. You can obviously, by watching a video like this, you're becoming aware of some of the other factors. But I would just say that, frankly, you can kind of jump to the head of the line, and by working with or talking with at a minimum somebody who's done this professionally, someone who is bound by a fiduciary oath to act in your best interest, someone that has the experience, the education, and the ability to actually give competent, authoritative advice that is going to be specific to your situation. Because, yeah, there's averages. Rules of thumb are based off of averages. Well, I hate to break it to you, you're not average. So your plan needs to be based off of your situation, your information, your lifestyle. A plan that's based on averages. I don't know who average is, but that's not your name. Okay. We need to base a plan. We need to build a plan based on you. I don't know how else to say it. That's just how it works. Now that you understand why Vanguard isn't always accurate, you are much better equipped to retire sooner than you think. But if you'd like to analyze your specific situation using these more accurate calculation methods, click the link in the description to schedule a complimentary call where I will give you personal advice tailored to your situation. And I will see you in the next one.